Indlela, indlela yethu. Indlela, indlela yobunye.
Good day and welcome to another episode of Indlela, the way we do things and the way as the AFM we move forward. You know, many a time we as parents are concerned about our children, especially when they leave home and they go to another town or another city, or they even go overseas. And parents will come and say, please pray for my child. I'm worried that he or she might lose the way and they might lose their faith. But actually, this starts much earlier in the life of the child. And to help unpack this today, I've got with me Pastor Rudy Kurtzen, our treasurer of the church. He's not only the man of finance, but also he's a man of faith. And with his wife, they have raised their children to serve God. And we welcome you. Welcome. It's good to have you with me today.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And we're going to unpack this whole issue of how do we pass our faith to our children?
Yeah, it's one of those questions that we as parents, as Christian parents, must ask ourselves constantly. When your child is born, what is your aim? What must happen to this child? And I think somewhere in the Psalms, David says that your sons is like a quiver in your holder.
Yeah.
You must point them into a direction, and to parent your children with a specific thing in mind. What will happen to this child? Do I want my children to look like one day when they're grown up? And I think, to pass on the faith to our children is not simply to tell them what to do and how Christians do things, but to show them how we live and what we do, and that we follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, and that we ourselves have a deep personal relationship with Christ, because that's how they learn.
Yeah, it's not just teaching the child to pray, because I remember when I was small, and even with my daughter, you teach the child how to pray. You start with a simple prayer, and they pray, you read a Bible story, but it's much more than this. What does it actually mean to pass on the faith to the child?
Yeah, it's one of those questions that I think that confronts us all, because, to be a child of God doesn't mean to just be obedient. But it needs to be a relationship. It needs to be something that our children can watch us, see how do we conduct faith, how do we do things. And many times, are we the same person at home than the one that we are at church?
Yes.
Are we the same person when we with family and friends than we are at home? And those things, if there's a difference between those two people in our homes, we sometimes create confusion. And our children see those things and they get confused, because then they don't understand what is faith really. And if they don't see it from us, or if they get that message, I think we're in trouble. And we as parents have got that message is very important for us.
So that consistent example, just being real, just being a person of integrity in front of your children. I've had some people, young people coming to say to me, Pastor, my parent is a church angel and a house devil. meaning the person is not the same person. And what you're saying is just being the same person. Not saying that you don't have struggles, but you're just real in front of your child.
Absolutely. And to be somebody that is relatable to, that you can be yourself in front of your children, but that they can also be themselves in front of you, and that they can say, I'm thankful for the parents that I have, and to be real in your life, because how we treat our spouses, how we treat our children, how we treat people around us, especially the ones that are the service and the people that put petrol in your car, those messages that our children get will also go through into their life and how they treat people and what they do to people. So I think those things are so important that for us to sometimes say sorry. I many times had to say sorry to my children because sometimes I've just lost it. I said things that I shouldn't have said. I once remember that I got quite angry at something that my son did, and I went off on him, and afterwards I realized, phew, that was completely the wrong thing. I had to go back to him, went into his room and sat on his bed and said, my son, sorry. I overstepped the line. I lost it, and can you forgive me? And we had a hug, and he said, "Dad, I understand. I sometimes also lose it."
So what I hear you saying, it is not just about passing on, we believe the following things, this is our faith, but it's also passing on life. And that includes that you're not a perfect person. You also make mistakes, but then to own up to the mistakes in front of your children, and that's part of passing on the faith.
Absolutely. No, because I think in the past, many a times, children saw their parents as somebody that is there, far away from
Far
them.
away.
And not somebody that's close and that they can relate with and that they can see and do life with them, you know. So I think our greatest goal is not to raise churchgoers,
Yeah.
but to raise lifelong men and women of God.
That's powerful, yeah. But we are obviously, as time progresses and we look back to our parents and the way they raised us, and we can say many things about that, as our children can say about the way we raised them. But we are in a time, again, where there are challenges, where the culture of the day challenges parents. And what do you think, if you are looking especially at younger parents and even young people who are to be parents, what are the challenges that they face these days in your view, in today's culture? And how can they respond to that in the context of passing on the faith to their children?
I think social media and peer pressure and expectations that there is and the culture that we are sometimes promotes things that are counter Jesus Christ. It's not what Jesus Christ wants to do. But I don't think parents must go in competition with those pressures that there are in our life. But that we and we cannot respond to every voice.
Yeah.
But we need to be, as parents and young parents that are coming up, and my children are parents now, and this is one of the things that we have discussed. How not to react in fear of the impact of what's outside, but to build strong children from the beginning that can resist these things by arming them with the right information, and ourselves not sitting and scrolling the whole day on our phones, but ourselves, having a healthy relationship with social media and with what happens around us in the world. I think those things, the example that we set, is much more important than saying do not do that or take things away. For instance, we've got people very close to us, and because of the fact that they know what the impact can be, and their children are quite young, they just decided they will not have a TV in their house. So they've got a lot of spare time playing games, sit and read, and children. Those children, I see them now and then. They've got an imagination that you can't believe, because they don't have any other things that steal their imagination and steal their time, and because TVs and social media just take up all your time.
That's a big challenge.
That's a big challenge. Many times people use the TV or social media as a child, to care for the child,
keep them busy.
Keep them busy. Put them in front of the children and the TV, and you can go on with your life. I think it's the worst thing that you can do. It's very dangerous to do, So we never did it with our children. We were so thinking of doing what is right for our children and helping them to do the right things at the right time, and to assist them in that, and not just sitting in front of the TV, but that we are there speaking to them, enjoying time with them.
I don't know about you, but I remember when I grew up, my parents would many times just say, do this. And if I ask why, they say, because I say so.
Mine did the same.
I realized with my own child, that doesn't work. I need to try and explain why. So I think that's even more true today, that you don't just say, do this because I say so, but that you try and explain why, because that's part of what we believe. Why do we do this in this way? How do we manage it in this way? So what daily actions, you talked about personal example earlier, but what daily actions, just as a way of living our natural daily life, can one import and apply to influence your children's faith?
Yeah, I think it's, I said something about it maybe earlier, but the way that we do life and how we conduct ourselves. How do our children see us when we have a huge disappointment? And how do we react to that disappointment? Because they will also experience disappointments.
Yeah.
And how our example will help them how to handle it. When I'm in an accident, or when I'm sick, how do I conduct myself? Am I okay, or am I somebody that's just running around? And that way, helping them to understand, because children will forget sermons, but they will never forget our life. They will never forget the way that we treated them and how we conducted ourselves in their presence. And we do make mistakes. I'm not sitting here in front of you and telling I didn't make mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. But I think in those crunch moments, especially when it's really difficult, that we do not hide, but that we allow our children to also experience the things that we experience. For instance, sometimes we've got friends or family that's going maybe through a divorce, or that's going through, somebody lost their job. But to use that as an example to help them, how do you conduct yourself?
Like a learning moment.
A learning moment, and use those learning moments.
Yeah. So it's not just about taking your child to church with you or dropping them off at the youth, but it's also sharing life with them and talking about experiences, good and bad. That's part of passing on the faith.
Absolutely. And to conduct yourself in such a way that they want to follow your footsteps. That they say, this is the way I want to conduct my life. This is how I want to live, There's certain things that I decided before we even had children that I will never do. And I never did it. Because, from my upbringing, there's a lot of things that you just mentioned, that our parents did, but for my children, there's certain things that they never heard me say. There's certain things that they never saw me do. There's certain things that they never had the privilege of, that my father did this or that. I put myself in a much higher standard of my own conduct because I know I've only got one chance.
Influence.
To have the influence in their lives.
So in your context as a family, because that's why I ask you to be here, because when I perceive the family, I can see the children, the grandchildren, they're all serving God. They're all church people, they're all active in ministry. So in your family, did you have some practical habits or family traditions that you built in proactively to strengthen your children and to help to create this environment of faith? Or, is there something like that you can share, or that you think there should be, that other people can build into their lives?
We after our children was born, I had the habit of every night when I wake up 2-3 o'clock in the night, I didn't just turn around and went to sleep again, but I got up and I went into the room where my child was lying, and I just prayed for them and started and blessed them. And prayed for their future wife or husband. Prayed for their life that the Lord is protecting them. So I literally, about every night, I had a time of prayer over them. One of the other things we had as a habit in our house, we used to eat our main meal in the afternoons. Because as a pastor, usually you're away at night. So we had our main meal in the afternoons, and it was specifically timed. My wife said, if you're not at home at 1 o'clock, you don't get food. So I had to, not that strict, but, she was, it was a time that we put aside. And my phone was not close by. We didn't answer the phone in the house. It was time around the table. And as they grew up, since they were only babies, we had a Bible study. Initially, they didn't understand, but as they started to come into the age, we had age-appropriate Bible studies available, readings of the Bible, and there's wonderful material out there that you can use as a family, and that we read it and we ask some questions. No, not to ask, can they remember, but to just, what did you hear from this? And then to pray and pray a blessing and allow them to pray. At times it started, no, I want to pray today, but we had a routine. I prayed then one day, the next day my wife, the next day my son, the next day my daughter. So we had and they learned how to pray at home, and they can pray in front of a huge congregation. They don't struggle because they are used to praying, and not praying words and using good language, but to pray is a sincere prayer from the heart, out of relationship and experience of what God has done in their life. Something else we usually on a Friday night, we had a family night, where we sometimes play games, sometimes just bought pizza and sit in front of the TV and watch a show maybe or something like that. But in the end of it, as a family, just having another time of blessing. Because I believe that there's a time that the father, the man of the house, needs to bless his family, bless his wife, bless his children, but not just a ordinary, Lord, bless my child, bless my wife.
Yeah.
But to prepare for the blessing. And that was a challenge for me to every Friday night have something else than the previous time. But when you pray for your family, God just wake up things in your heart and make you see a future for your children and for your wife and yourself. And that you can at that moment in time pray those things over them and bless them with that, and they hear it. And that expectation of the blessing that they receive just help them to grow in their own faith with Jesus Christ.
Wow. So what I hear you saying is there's intentional
Absolutely.
time with your family. That intentional thinking, not just doing something for doing something, but intentionally spending time with your family, instilling in them certain values, instilling in them the faith.
The whole time. And our children, they are grown up now, our grandchildren, we've already got grandchildren, they go to church every Sunday because we went to church every Sunday. Not because I'm the pastor, because I wanted to be to go to church. And they also learned some skills there, and also were serving as men and women of God to serve together as a family. And one of the things that we had a prayer list. It's things that we prayed about. Maybe a family member, maybe there's maybe something in our own home, Our car broke down, Lord, we need the money, and stuff like that, So, but to celebrate the answers that God gives us when we see the answers. And it helps them to grow in trusting God for things around them, and praying maybe for somebody at school, or praying for a friend, or praying for a family member, and expecting God will answer their prayers.
Making it practical.
Yes, yeah.
So, but some people will say, but my child is now becoming a teenager. we hear that often. And now they have questions. Now they don't always agree. Now they don't want to go to church. Now they want to. How do you then continue to encourage and support your child's faith development in that stage of life?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because I believe that the faith path is formed at a very young age.
Yeah.
And that it comes. But as children grow up, especially when they're in their teenage years, they sometimes start to ask questions. And we as parents need to be very careful how we answer those questions. That we don't have you must do it. You mentioned it earlier. But to go and sit down and ask your teenager, okay, ask your question, and to be honest. Sometimes you say, I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you say, this is how I understand it.
Yes.
How do you understand it? Why do you ask the question? What is in your heart? And to encourage them to also look at their own motives and also things that's happening in their own lives, because now they are starting to think about things in life, and us as parents helping them to, how do we think about life? And assisting them with that process. I must be honest, I've had wonderful teenage children. I never had one of them that said they didn't want to go to church. So it's a difficult question for me to answer, I must say, because they always wanted to go, and they always wanted to serve God, because there was, I think, just in their hearts that they wanted to follow Him because they had a relationship with Him. But I must say there were some times when they had terrible disappointments, especially in relations, stuff like that happened. And I remember sometimes one evening my son came home and he was just in tears. His life was shattered because things just didn't go right in a specific relationship that he thought had hope. But we could just sit with him and just cry with him and pray with him and trust God for what must happen in his life. So those things also sometimes happen. But to be there, if you're here and see your child is not in a good space, your teenager, don't go and ignore it. Make a time, and if they say, no, I don't want to speak about it, respect that. But then say, let me know when you're ready. And I want to just support you. I won't criticize. I won't say, I told you so. Because many times as a parent say, I told you so. That was the wrong one. Whatever it may be, should have not been friends with that one. But never to go there, but to just be gracious and accept and help and guide.
So it's not about ignoring your child's questions or the time that he or she goes through, but to be there as a parent and really honestly talk to them. Allow the questions. Don't say you shouldn't ask the question. Allow the question, listen to the question, and try to the best of your ability to answer the question. But also know that if, for example, as you said, they go through disappointment, that you are there. You can also share that you also in your own life had disappointments. And how did you handle that? And how do you encourage the child to handle that? That's part of passing on on the faith.
Amen.
Maybe a last question from my side. If now your child moves out of the house, I mean, it happened with your children as well. Sooner or later, most children move out of the house. And now they go to university, or they go to a different city or town, or maybe a different country. How do you continue to support them in their faith without now trying to be overprotective parent?
I think there's the parenting style when your child leaves home is to be a mentor and supporter. That's all. You cannot at that moment in time say, did you go to church on Sunday? Did you go to the youth meeting? Did you go to the student prayer meeting? Whatever. That's their choice to do. And our children differ. Two children can grow up in the same house.
True.
The one will do it this way and the other one will be doing that way. And not to use the one as a weapon against the other one, Then your brother did this and you don't do that, Allow them to develop their own way of how they experience things. Because some of them will maybe for the university years never go to church. But because of the foundations that were laid properly, the moment when they move out of that phase, go back to church, start to look for that because there's a longing in their heart for that. And I think I say to many parents, but I want to say it in this forum as well, trust your own upbringing of your children. Trust the way that you taught them and helped them and guided them, because God will honor that.
Yeah.
And sometime they will just grab back to that remembrance, those things that happened in their life, and they will start to go back to those things. So don't be a helicopter mom or dad hauling over them, what are you doing and stuff. Just release them. Trust God, because it's actually His children. It's ours as well, but it's actually His children. Yeah. And He will care for them and He will look after them better than we can do.
So it's that principle of the Bible that says, train your child while he's young, and he will not leave the way.
Yeah.
So it's that. And then you must trust. You train them while they're young with intensity, with integrity, and intentional. Yeah. But when they're now grown, you have to trust that. Thank you so much for sharing with us your journey, your examples. Maybe a last word to parents and to prospective parents.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things that can happen to a married couple is to have children. And when we receive that child, we are so excited, but to not lose that excitement about our children, but to have a glimmer in our eye every time we see them, and that we accept them unconditionally, love them unconditionally, and just enjoy them, because you will have your children for the rest of your life. They will hopefully carry you to the grave.
Yeah.
And that they will do that in such a manner that they will say, this man, this woman, my dad, my mom, were the best I could ever had. But to enjoy your children and to encourage them and love them. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I really enjoyed it. It's a wonderful way for me to also, in my own life, it's one of the things that I'm just so thankful for, is for my children, my grandchildren, to see them and enjoy them in that stage of my life. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. I know you are passionate about your children and your grandchildren and passing on faith to them. And may we all be passionate about passing the faith to our children, to the next generation, even our grandchildren. And may we be intentional about it. And may God strengthen you as you do so, not because you are perfect, but because you are a believer and you are intentional in loving God and passing your faith to your children and your grandchildren. May God bless you, and see you again in our next episode of Indlela. Thank you so much.